Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're tackling a big one, Harper Lee's To Kill a Mockingbird.
A classic for sure.
Definitely. But we're not just doing a book report here. Our mission, for you listening, is to really get under the hood and see this book as this incredible piece of persuasion, like a carefully built argument, legal, moral, that was really designed to make people think differently.
Yeah, it's more than just a story.
Exactly. So we've looked at literary analysis, rhetorical breakdowns, context, all that stuff. And we're using a rhetorical framework to figure out how Lee managed to turn this, seemingly simple childhood story into something so powerful it still hits hard today.
Right. And that's the fascinating part. It's this masterful blend, really. Social commentary, morality, but wrapped up in fiction. She used the novel as this vehicle, this rhetorical tool, to look at really tough issues. Systemic injustice, empathy, how kids wake up to the moral complexities of the world. We're looking at the argument's architecture.
Okay, let's unpack that. Starting with the basics, the context. Who wrote it when? Harper Lee, right, from Monroeville, Alabama.
Yeah, Deep South. And that gives her immediate credibility, Ethos. She knew that world firsthand. The 1930s South.
All those unspoken rules.
Exactly. The racial lines, the gender expectations, the hypocrisy simmering under the surface of a town like Macomb. She lived it.
But the timing is crucial, isn't it? The book said in the 30s, a depression.
Right. But she published it in 1960, smack in the middle of the civil rights movement.
Which is just, wow, that gap is a deliberate rhetorical move then.
Oh, absolutely. It's like a safety net. It creates this rhetorical mirror. By setting it in the past, in the 30s, she could critique the injustices of that time.
Which let her implicitly critique the same stuff happening in the 1960s.
Precisely. Without being maybe quite as direct or confrontational as she might have needed to be otherwise. It allowed her to tackle that moral paralysis, particularly in white Southern society, pushing for reflection for change.
So the immediate trigger, the exigence, was that need to wake people up, especially white Americans, about segregation, inequality, but doing it through the lens of history.
Yeah, using history to speak to the present. And think about who she was primarily talking to.
The audience back then, mostly white middle-class readers, I'd guess.
That's right. And her goal wasn't really to lecture them, not like a textbook. It was moral persuasion, getting them to feel something. The core idea, the thesis, comes through Atticus, doesn't it?
Climb into another's skin and walk around in it. Empathy is a civic duty.
Exactly. That's the heart of the persuasive effort.
Okay, so that sets the stage. Now, the architecture of the argument itself, this is where it gets really interesting for me. How does Lee actually build trust, the ethos, stir up feelings, and make a logical case, logos all within this story? Let's start with trust, with ethos, because without that, the whole thing collapses, right?
Totally. And Lee anchors the ethos almost entirely in one character, Atticus Finch.
The moral center.
Absolutely. His whole demeanor, measured, rational, calm, fair, even when everyone's against him. He represents moral clarity, education, integrity. Lee makes him the voice of reason.
So, by trusting Atticus,
you implicitly trust the ethical framework he represents. You accept his view of justice as the right one. His character is the ethical authority of the book.
Okay, Atticus handles the ethos. But what about pathos, the emotion? It's obviously a very emotional book.
Yeah.
Tom Robinson's trial, Boo Radley. Does it ever feel, I don't know, maybe manipulative, too sentimental?
That's a fair question. It could easily tip over, couldn't it? But I think Lee is smarter than that. She doesn't go for, cheap shots. Instead, it's often these quiet, understated moments, innocence bumping up against prejudice. That evokes compassion, sure, but also a kind of moral discomfort in the reader.
How so? Yeah.
Well, think about the contrast. Tom Robinson's trial is this big public tragedy. It makes you angry, pitying, you see the systemic failure. But then you have the kids' interactions with Boo Radley. That's much more personal, quiet. It evokes a different kind of empathy, maybe deeper. It makes you question your own assumptions about who deserves kindness, who's other.
So it's layered. Personal empathy with Boo, which feels achievable, maybe. And then that scales up to the bigger systemic injustice with Tom.
Exactly. It grounds the emotion. And that emotion isn't floating free. It's supported by logos, by the logical structure.
Okay, logos. How does that work in a novel?
Well, think about it. The whole novel kind of mirrors a legal argument, which makes sense, right, given the trial at its heart.
Yeah, okay.
Lee presents the evidence, Macomb's hypocrisy, its prejudice, its complacency. She shows it to you piece by piece.
Through Scout's eyes, mostly.
Right. Then you get the moral testimony, principally through Atticus's closing arguments at the trial. That's a pure piece of rational argument. Logic, facts, law.
Pointing out the inconsistencies, the prejudice driving the accusation.
Exactly. And the structure itself, the whole narrative arc, leads to this implicit verdict. Not just on Tom, but on the town, on the moral failures she's exposed. The conviction is shown to be logically, legally, morally wrong.
So the logic backs up the emotion. It's not just feel bad, it's here's why this is wrong, rationally speaking.
Precisely. It anchors the feeling in reason.
Yeah.
Makes it stick.
That framework evidence, testimony, verdict is a really powerful way to see the book structure. Okay, let's shift gears a bit. We've talked about the appeals. What about the actual storytelling mechanics? How does Lee engineer this experience for the reader? The narrative toolkit, let's call it.
Yeah, good way to put it. And the absolute key here is the narrator, Scout.
A child narrator, but looking back as an adult.
Right. That duality is crucial. It's genius, really. You get this mix of language. Sometimes it's the simple, direct, kind of naive voice of a kid.
Seeing things plainly without the adult filters.
Exactly. And then sometimes it shifts to this more reflective, sophisticated tone of the adult Scout understanding it all in hindsight.
And that lets us, the adult readers, see the absurdity of the prejudice through her clear eyes.
Yeah.
Right? We feel kind of aligned with her, maybe a bit superior to the prejudiced folks in Macomb.
Spot on. It highlights that tension between innocence and learned bias, between naivety and moral understanding. It makes us more open to Atticus's perspective because we see the flaws in everyone else's so clearly through Scout.
So the narrator choice is fundamental. What else in the toolkit? Juxtaposition.
Oh, definitely. Lee is constantly putting things side by side to show contradictions. Complacency next to courage. Hypocrisy next to integrity.
Like the missionary tea scene. That one always gets me.
Yes. The missionary ladies, it's perfect, isn't it?
Painfully perfect.
They're sitting there, all proper, expressing such deep concern for, what was it, the Maroonahs. Some fictional tribe far away.
While being completely awful about the black community right there, Macon.
And criticizing Atticus. It's just, the irony is so thick, it exposes the hollowness of their respectability, their moral blindness, without Lee having to spell it out.
She just shows you the contrast, and you draw the conclusion, which ties into another big tool, symbolism, the Mockingbird.
The central symbol, yeah. It's Lee's way of making the ethics really clear and accessible.
Simple rule, don't kill mockingbirds.
Right. They just make music. They don't harm anyone. So, Tom Robinson, Boo Radley, they are the mockingbirds. Harming them, being cruel to the innocent or the harmless, is presented as fundamentally wrong, a sin even.
It boils down complex issues into something emotionally immediate.
Makes it resonate. And finally, think about the pacing, the structure of the whole book.
It's chronological mostly, episodic. We follow Scout growing up.
Exactly. It mirrors her coming of age. It's not like she has one big epiphany. It's gradual.
Each little episode, Mrs. DuBose, the Radley mystery, schoolyard stuff, it all builds.
It builds towards the trial, yes, but it also builds her moral understanding, and ours alongside her. The structure reinforces the idea that becoming morally mature isn't instant. It happens through facing difficult truths, confronting injustice, confronting your own biases. You grow with Scout.
Okay, so pulling all these pieces together, Atticus as the ethos anchor, the careful use of pathos, the logical structure, the brilliant narrator, the symbols, the pacing. What's the big picture? How effective is this whole rhetorical package?
I think it's incredibly effective. Lee found this amazing balance, this equilibrium.
Yeah.
It's realistic. It doesn't shy away from the ugliness of the time and place, but it's also a moral allegory.
She manages to teach without preaching too hard.
Exactly. She educates her audience about injustice, but crucially, she does it through compassion, not condemnation. She avoids alienating the very readers she needs to persuade. That's the key.
So our main takeaway here is that To Kill a Mockingbird works because Lee masterfully combined that ethical authority, the emotional clarity, and the unique perspective of innocence. She built this argument that wasn't just about society out there, but made it personal for the reader.
Yes, she turned social critique into something deeply felt, convincing people that justice really does start with empathy. It has to start with seeing the other person.
So, to wrap up for you listening, remember to see this book not just as a story you read in school, but as this intricate legal and moral argument designed deliberately to shift thinking, to make you feel the need for justice on a personal level.
And that transformation, that personal connection, is why it endures. It functions as this ongoing civic text, bridging literature and real-world conversations about society. So here's something to maybe mull over. Think about how those elements Lee used, especially that kind of measured ethical authority we see in Atticus, his calm response even to intense hatred, combined with that pull towards empathy. How could those strategies be applied today to our current issues? How do we foster that kind of moral vision now?
That's a great question to end on. How do we build those bridges today?
Yeah, that's the enduring power, I think.